Hello, I'm Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas war. It is currently the evening of January 26, 2024 in the United States, the morning of January 27, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, Hamas released a 5-minute video showing 3 female hostages that are held by the group, Karina Ariev and Danielle Gilboa, who are both 19-year-old soldiers, and Doron Steinbrecher, who is an older woman who is held by the group. Each of the hostages say that they were held in captivity for 107 days, indicating, if that is true, that the video was shot 5 days ago. In the video, among others, Karina Ariev says that she was deserted by the people who were supposed to have brought her home, and she states that she is constantly running and hiding under bombings because Israel does not stop the war. She asks in the video, "How did it end up that I am more scared of my own country than I am of Hamas?" Also stating, "I appeal to you, my Prime Minister, and to the other ministers, because regrettably returning the hostages is not at the top of your priorities." Danielle Gilboa in the video also states similar things. She asks, "Where were you on October 7th when I was kidnapped from my bed, and where are you now?" She also adds appeals, "Start doing what you need to do, dear government, bring us back alive." Doron Steinbrecher says similar things. She also says that she has been in mortal danger, and for a few weeks she was held with her friends, Yotam, Samer, and Alon, who were killed by the IDF. That refers to the 3 hostages who managed to escape and were shot dead by the IDF despite holding up white flags. All 3 at the end of each of their sections call on their families to pressure the government, and the video concludes with the 3 of them yelling, "You have abandoned us, left us behind, we want to go home now." The video also ends showing the images of 3 of them in an hourglass that is running out of time. Other news related to the hostages, reports were released today that the head of the Shabak in Israel is going to join the upcoming meeting in Europe next week. The meeting is going to be with the CIA director, the Qatari Prime Minister, the head of the Mossad, and the Egyptian head of intelligence. And the aim of this meeting is to come up with a breakthrough in the stalled negotiations. According to reports in Israel's Ynet today, sources stated that at this stage the deal is still very distant, adding, and I quote, "There are no keys, there are no details. There is still no opening point in the negotiations, since the terms of Hamas are unacceptable to Israel, and there is no opening point for debate. Hamas insists on no IDF soldiers in Gaza, on continuing to govern Gaza. For Israel, it's a non-starter. There are no conditions." And thus, according to reports, the meeting in Europe, which reportedly is going to be in Paris, is less about finalizing the stages of the deal and more about how to break through this point of contention, reportedly that Hamas is demanding a complete ceasefire and end to the war at the end of this deal, and Israel is not willing to even contemplate that. Moving on to the fighting in the Gaza Strip, rockets were sent from the Gaza Strip, targeting the areas surrounding the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. Rockets targeted primarily the areas of Eshkol, Ein HaShlosha, and Kisufim. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, the IDF reported carrying out a combined air and ground offensive against different Hamas terror infrastructures. A booby-trap building and military installations were reportedly attacked, as well as launching sites and operational tunnel entrances. In addition, the Navy reported that it carried out bombings along the coastline of the north, did not report specifically where this happened. In the center of the Gaza Strip, bombings were reported throughout Deir el-Balach and El Bureij as well. In El Maghazi refugee camp, the El Qassam brigades, that is the military wing of Hamas, reported ambushing IDF soldiers emerging from a tunnel, detonating devices, and confirming that several of the soldiers were killed. I will add there was no confirmation from the IDF that any soldiers were killed in El Maghazi in the last 24 hours. In Han Yunis, in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, there's ongoing expansion of the operation. This is where most of the fighting is currently happening. The IDF reported that since the Han Yunis invasion, over 200 tunnel entrances have been located, and 10 rocket launching sites have been destroyed. Hamas operatives firing RPGs in the outskirts of the city were killed in an IDF drone attack today, and substantial gun battles were reported also around the Nasser hospital, that is the main hospital in Han Yunis. The IDF also reported that its 98th Brigade, that is a brigade that's made up of the special commando units, has had dozens of encounters with Hamas operatives, and that many Hamas operatives have been killed in the ongoing gun battles, including sniping units and units firing anti-tank missiles. The IDF Air Force reportedly carried out several dozen rounds of targeted attacks in different areas of western Han Yunis, reportedly including operational Hamas apartments, weapons warehouses, lookout posts, and Hamas gathering areas. The Al Qassam brigades also reported there was intensive fighting throughout Han Yunis, specifically in the western parts of the city, claiming responsibility for firing several Yassin 105 missiles at Israeli tanks. In addition, in Rafah today, there were several bombings reported in different parts of the city. Several Palestinians were reported killed, however, it was not reported specifically in which parts of the city or where specifically the bombings occurred. Other news related to the Gaza Strip: the U.S. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby stated today that Israel changed its fighting tactics in Gaza due to U.S. pressure, adding in response to questions that the U.S. is not shy about sharing its information and its feelings about the fighting with Israel. He specifically noted the fewer bombings that have been going on and the opening of the Kerem Shalom crossing, adding that the War Cabinet in Israel is especially receptive to the U.S. pressure. That is also an indication that the U.S. is talking specifically to the War Cabinet rather than to the expanded cabinet in Israel. Regarding casualties, one IDF soldier was reported killed in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers that were killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began to 222. 1,269 soldiers are reported injured since the invasion began. However, the number of injured soldiers varies depending on the different reports. Regarding Palestinian casualties, the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip reported 183 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians that were killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 26,083. A total of 64,487 Palestinians are reported injured in the Gaza Strip, and many more are still missing, buried under the rubble, and presumed dead. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, power failures were noted in the Nasser Hospital, again that is the main hospital in Khan Yunis. The World Health Organization stated that there are roughly 350 patients and some 5,000 internally displaced people that are taking refuge in the hospital. Reports of tank fire were also noted around the Al Amal Hospital, that is another hospital in the Khan Yunis area. The Palestinian Red Crescent reported that it established a field hospital in the Jabalia refugee camp, but it was not noted in this report if they did it in coordination with the IDF or not. Other news: Palestinians are continuing to evacuate from Khan Yunis. Specifically, the El Dahara neighborhood saw hundreds of Palestinians were evacuated from Khan Yunis, headed towards the overcrowded streets of Rafah and the El Mawasi refugee camp. Regarding the refugee camps, UNRWA today put out a statement of continuous spreading of hepatitis A throughout the different camps due to overcrowding and very bad hygiene and sanitary conditions. According to reports, the number of those suspected with hepatitis A are 16 times higher than those in November. Other news: UNRWA announced today that it has opened an investigation against workers that Israel supplied information about them regarding their participation in the October 7th attack. The head of UNRWA, Philip Lazzarini, specifically stated that in order to protect the organization immediately launched an investigation when it received this information and has severed all contact with those workers. According to reports, the number of workers are 12. This was not an official report, but it was stated on several social media outlets that usually are fairly accurate. Following the opening of this investigation, the United States announced that it is temporarily freezing all monetary transfers to UNRWA, examining the actions that the UN takes with regards to these charges. This move was welcomed by Israeli UN Ambassador Gilad Erdan, who stated that Israel has long stated that UNRWA cooperates with terrorism. Other news: the Kerem Shalom crossing was again blocked today by protesters in Israel. This is the third day in a row that protesters are blocking the entrance of humanitarian aid trucks and effectively shutting down the Kerem Shalom crossing. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin complained about this when he had a conversation with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. As trucks were barred from entering, reportedly these trucks are carrying a lot of food supplies and also flour as a result of that deal between Israel and the United States that is coming into the Ashdod port. However, it cannot enter the Gaza Strip. According to sources in Israel, there was some suggestion that Israel's Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, has ordered the police to not remove the protesters since he is bypassing the cabinet's decision to allow humanitarian aid in. Itamar Ben-Gvir openly stated that Israel should not allow any humanitarian aid into Gaza. Now protesters are blocking the entrance of humanitarian trucks, and the police that are under the purview of Minister Ben-Gvir are reportedly not removing the protesters. No reports were made about how many trucks entered, but in the last several days, the protesters did manage to almost block the entry of all trucks through the Kerem Shalom crossing. 2 days ago, instead of 60 trucks that were due to enter, 9 managed to enter. Yesterday, also 9 instead of well over 100 they were supposed to enter. No reports were made today. Moving on to the West Bank, substantial IDF activity was reported in the Kilkilia area. According to the IDF, it entered to carry out arrests and search for weapons. Substantial confrontations and gun battles erupted, and several Palestinians were reported injured. Similarly, in the Dir Abu Darif area near Jenin, the IDF also entered the city in regular activity. Confrontations then erupted, and according to different reports, one Palestinian was badly injured. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, after several days of quiet, there was substantial escalation in the firing of rockets and in IDF retaliations in the last 24 hours. Substantial barrages of rockets were sent towards the Adamit and Arab al-Ramsha area, as well as Shomra in the western Galilee. Rockets also targeted the areas of Zerit, Harmon, Margaliot. Anti-tank missiles were sent towards Avivim. Hezbollah stated that it fired 3 Burkan missiles, those are substantially bigger missiles, stating that they were targeting spy equipment of Israel along the border near the Zerit military base. And earlier in the day, a suspicious aerial target was also intercepted by the IDF above Rosh Nikra. Regarding IDF retaliations, responding to the two barrages, the IDF stated that it attacked two operational infrastructures with Hezbollah operatives in them, in the Beit Leaf village, and a military compound in the Deir Amas village as well. Warplanes also attacked compounds in the Binjbel area. El Manar, that is a Hezbollah affiliate, reported that the IDF attacked a house in the Deir Amas attack, and there was attacks against the Hula village. Lebanese news agency reported that 2 people were killed in the Beit Leaf attack, and according to reports of Lebanon, the IDF also called upon civilians in the El Randoria village near Binjbel to begin evacuating due to planned attacks that were going to target that village, and that many people were seen evacuating. Hezbollah announced the deaths of 4 operatives in IDF retaliations throughout the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Hezbollah operatives that the group says have died in the war to 171. According to IDF assessments, that number is much higher. In addition, responding to a video that Hezbollah disseminated yesterday showing a missile hitting a radar station in Rosh Nikra, the IDF today put out pictures showing that same site and claiming that it was not hit, saying this is where the Hezbollah organization fabricated the video saying that the missile managed to target this specific radar. However, here it is, not hit. In addition, after yesterday, Lebanese foreign minister made statements about negotiations between Israel and Lebanon as a possible diplomatic solution to resolve border disputes, and specifically said that Hezbollah would also have an interest in a diplomatic solution. Seemingly responding to this, today the deputy leader of Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, stated, and I quote, "If the war in Gaza does not stop, the war in Lebanon cannot stop. Any political debate about the southern front is postponed until after the Gaza war." He then added, "There is no connection between political rights in Lebanon, either the president or anyone else, to what is happening in the south. We are paying the price on the southern front and aspire to ease the lives of Lebanese so that they can continue their lives as they were." In other words, Naim Qassem is saying, it doesn't matter who you are, you could be the president as far as we're concerned, you don't speak for what happens in the southern parts of the country. Hezbollah is the one that's paying the price, bearing the brunt of its war with Israel, and that there is no possibility of a diplomatic solution between Israel and Lebanon as far as Hezbollah is concerned until the war in Gaza is over. Some of the regional developments, Houthi spokesperson Yahya Saria stated today that the Houthis attacked a British oil tanker with nautical missiles off the coast of Aden. British security company Ombre also did report that a fire broke out on a cargo ship after it was hit by missiles in the southeast areas of Aden. There was no information given about how badly the ship was damaged. The crew was reportedly safe. There was no information given about if the coalition retaliated to this attack or not. Some of the political and general trends from the last 24 hours. U.S. President Biden spoke to the Emir of Qatar and the Egyptian president about advancing the hostage deal. The Qatari Emir, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, emphasized the need to strengthen regional cooperation in order to stop the war as part of a hostage deal, i.e. echoing what Hamas is demanding, that any hostage deal has to come with some sort of plan for stopping the war. In the conversation with the Egyptian President Al-Sisi, the two discussed regional developments and the need for international community to protect civilians in Gaza. Other political news, Russia today announced that Israel is no longer updating it prior to its attacks in Syria. So part of the deteriorating relationship between Israel and Russia has played out in Syria. In Syria, Russia has a lot of troop stations. Large parts of the Wagner forces are also stationed there, as well as a lot of anti-aircraft equipment that's there. As a result of different deals, since 2017, whenever Israel would carry out an attack in Syria, it updated Russia in advance in order to make sure there are no Russian troops or planes in the area. However, part of the deteriorating relationship between the countries, according to Russia, for weeks already, Israel is not bothering to update it prior to attacks in Syria. The major political news in the last 24 hours is the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, published its ruling with regards to the injunctions that South Africa requested. So South Africa requested that the International Court of Justice issue 9 injunctions to Israel, specifically asking it to call upon Israel to stop the war and actually halt all IDF activity. In turn, Israel asked the court to throw the case out, saying it has no jurisdiction and that South Africa did not present any evidence. Relating to this, the court did not throw out the case, nor did it accept that there was enough evidence to state that Israel is committing genocide and thus compelled to stop the war. Instead, the court issued 6 different injunctions. Those injunctions were, number 1, Israel is to do all it can to avoid any actions in Gaza that could be considered genocide. So this relates to Article 2 of the Treaty to Prevent Genocide that says if you are trying to kill an entire population or a subset of a population, and a list of acts that might be included in that, Israel is to avoid any acts like that. Israel must effectively and immediately ensure that its army does not carry out any such acts. Number 3, Israel must take all steps it can to both avoid and public incitement towards genocide in Gaza. So this relates to the evidence that South Africa did bring forth of the different incitement of different ministers calling upon effective genocide in Gaza. Number 4, Israel must take all steps it can to effectively and immediately enable basic services and humanitarian aid to the civilians in Gaza. Number 5, Israel must take effective steps to avoid destruction and give evidence regarding the charges of genocide in Gaza. Number 6, Israel is required to report to the court about its actions with regard to these injunctions within a month. At the end of reading the ruling, the president of the ICJ, Justice Joanne Donoghue, called upon the release of all hostages that are held in the Gaza Strip. Regarding responses to the ruling, both in Israel and in South Africa, the countries were relatively content. In Israel, the prevailing sentiment was this was as good as could be, given that on the one hand, Israel asked for the case to be thrown out, on the other hand, it was very unlikely that it would be thrown out. So given that, Israel was not ordered to stop the war, and in fact most of the injunctions that were given are things that Israel can live with and can live up to. In turn, in South Africa, the prevailing sentiments seemed to be the fact that the case was not thrown out and that some injunctions were leveled at Israel, and more importantly, that the case is going to go to court, shows that South Africa did present enough evidence to convince the court there is what to debate, and that was seen as victory as well. Regarding statements in Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu stated that the court rightly rejected the appeal to deny Israel's right to defend itself. However, that the court's agreeing to debate the question is a stain on the court that will not be removed for generations. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, Minister Gantz, also made statements calling the court completely biased and saying that it is not actually seeking justice. However, the statement that was most echoed in the world was that of Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir, who stated, and I quote, "The decision of the anti-Semitic court in The Hague proves what was already known. The court is not seeking justice, but the persecution of the Jewish people. They were silent in the Holocaust, and they continue their hypocrisy, Hague Schmeig." It is noteworthy that the court did not exist in the time of the Holocaust. In turn, in South Africa, there were also different statements made that congratulated the court and stated that it is a victory for the rule of law and seeking justice for the Palestinian people. Hamas leader Sami Abu Zuhairi stated to Reuters that the court's decision is an important development that contributes to the isolation of the occupation and exposes its crimes in Gaza. He called upon the world to compel Israel to implement the court's decision. The U.S. State Department in turn stated the United States believes the genocide accusations against Israel are baseless. In turn, Qatari foreign minister welcomed the injunctions, calling them a victory for humanity and specifically emphasizing the injunction that calls upon Israel to avoid any actions that violate Article 2 of the Genocide Treaty. Regarding the actual rulings, what is going to happen now is going to be a legal debate. Because, on the one hand, Israel is compelled to oblige by the court, and if it does not, for example, report to the court within a month about what actions it's taking, the court can go to the UN Security Council and say Israel is violating court rulings. On the other hand, the rulings of the court are fairly vague and open to interpretation. For example, the call upon Israel to facilitate the entrance of humanitarian aid into Gaza, Israel could claim it's already doing that. It's already living according to that. In turn, other interpretations could say, no, any restrictions that are mounted on this, such as inspecting trucks as before they come in, or limiting the type of aid that can come in, you're not abiding by that. So what's going to end up happening are legal debates regarding how Israel is or is not abiding by these decisions. Similarly, the decision or the injunction to prosecute people who incite to genocide. So does that mean that people who are members of Knesset and may have made certain calls have to be indicted in Israel, or is it enough that they're reprimanded? These things are going to end up in a legal case that the court is going to debate later on. Regarding the future of the Gaza Strip, one statement was made today by Israeli Minister of Communication Shlomo Karhi. He stated, and I quote, "Complete Israeli security control over the Gaza Strip is necessary. Jewish settlement throughout the entire land of Israel is our shared collective dream. We should encourage willful immigration of the residents of Gaza, but it appears that no country in the world wants this disease within it." So, despite the fact that these types of statements made by ministers are being used already as evidence in the International Court of Justice, that seemingly does not stop them from continuously using this type of rhetoric. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.